I found my wife's secret affair with her boss, and now she's claiming I owe her $500, $0 in marital debt to cover her betrayal. But the real shock came when I discovered she's already sold our family home for a fraction of its worth. Help! I don't know who to trust anymore. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be a complete cheat. Honestly, I thought we had a solid thing going, 2 kids, a nice house, decent jobs. We weren't perfect, but I trusted her. That trust shattered in a matter of days when I found out she had been sneaking around with her boss, Mark. The craziest part. She's been lying to my face for months, and I only found out because I stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. It all started about 2 weeks ago. Lisa had been acting a little off, more secretive, more defensive when I'd ask her where she was or who she was with. She'd brush it off, say she was working late or meeting a friend. But I noticed her phone was constantly glued to her hand, and she'd hide it. Whenever I entered the room, small things at first but enough to make me suspicious, I started checking her phone little by little. I was careful, trying not to make it obvious. Then one night I caught her. I was in bed trying to fall asleep when I saw her phone light up on the nightstand. Normally she'd turn off notifications or put it face down, but this time she left it face up. I couldn't resist. I reached over and glanced at the screen. There was a message from Mark, her boss, saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight, it's been too long." My stomach dropped. I scrolled a little more and found a string of texts that weren't just about work. They were about plans, meeting up secretly, talking about how they couldn't keep this going much longer without getting caught. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was just friendly banter, maybe I was overreacting. But then I found pictures. Screen captures from her phone, sent from her to Mark, photos of her in a hotel room half-dressed with the caption, "Sorry I lied about where I was. I needed." This, that was when I knew for sure. She'd been lying to my face, sneaking around with her boss, and all the signs had been there. Her secretive texts, her late nights, her evasiveness. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. I didn't want to believe it. How could she do this to me? To us? I kept thinking about everything we'd built, about the life I thought we had. And then I remembered the conversations she'd had recently about money. She'd been acting weird about the bills, saying we needed to tighten our belts, that we owed money to some shady people from her family's side. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just stressed about work, but now I wonder if it was all part of her cover story. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything I'd found, looking for clues I might have missed. It was like a puzzle, and I was missing the last piece. I knew I had to confront her. The question was how. I decided I'd wait until morning, but I didn't get much sleep. The next day I saw her leaving for work, but I followed her. She met Mark at a hotel downtown. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding. That was the moment I knew I'd never see our marriage the same way again. I've always believed in honesty, in sticking together through thick and thin. But this was betrayal on a whole new level. I didn't just find out she'd been cheating. I found out she'd been lying to my face, hiding the truth, and even worse, she was selling off parts of our life behind my back. I found out she had already sold our family home, our biggest asset, at a fraction of its worth without telling me. She'd been planning her escape for months, and I was just the last to know. Now I sit here trying to process everything, wondering how I got to this point. How did the woman I loved turn into someone capable of this kind of deception? And what do I do now? Do I fight for what's left? Do I try to salvage what's broken? Or do I cut my losses and walk away? I'm lost, angry, and betrayed beyond words. I thought I knew her, but I was so wrong. After I saw her sneaking into that hotel with Mark, everything changed. I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen anything. My mind was racing, trying to figure out my next move. I felt sick, like the ground was shifting under my feet. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I couldn't do it right away. I had to plan, think about what I wanted to say, how I wanted to handle this mess. That night I stayed up, staring at my phone, replaying everything I'd seen. I was furious at her, but more than that, I was hurt. Deep down, I felt like a fool for not noticing the signs earlier. She'd been acting strange for months, and I'd brushed it off because I didn't want to believe she was capable of something like this. But now I had proof. Hard proof. and it made me question everything about our marriage. In the early hours of the morning, I started digging. I needed to know just how far her lies went. I went through our bank accounts looking for any suspicious transactions. That's when I found it. An unusual transfer of money, about $50, $0, sent from our joint account to an anonymous account. I looked into it further and realized she had already sold our house, our family home, for a fraction of its real value. She had done it behind my back without telling me. I couldn't believe it. That house was our life, our memories, and she just handed it over like it was nothing. I felt my chest tighten. All this time I thought we were building a future together and she was planning her escape. I kept asking myself, how could she betray me like this? How could she lie so effortlessly? The woman I thought I knew was someone else entirely. I was angry at myself for trusting her so blindly. I had no idea she was capable of this level of deception. The next day, I knew I had to confront her. I waited until she got home from her work trip, though I knew she'd been lying about that too. When she finally stepped through the door, I was already waiting in the living room. I didn't bother to hide my anger. I just looked at her and said, "Lisa, I know everything. About Mark, the hotel, the money, the house. Tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" She looked surprised for a moment, then her face twisted into a defensive smirk. "Oh, so you've been spying on me now? That's just great. I was going to tell you eventually, but you're so paranoid." "Stop," I cut her off sharply. "I saw the messages, the hotel receipts, the transfer of our house. Don't lie to me anymore." She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Look, it's not what you think. Mark and I were just what? Having sex. Planning to leave me, selling our house behind my back." I interrupted, voice rising. "How long have you been cheating? How much money have you taken from us?" Her face turned red, but she kept up her act. "You don't understand. It's complicated. Mark's been helping me with some financial stuff." "Financial stuff? You mean you've been stealing from us? Selling our home? You're claiming I owe you $500, $0 in marital debt because I supposedly betrayed you. How about the betrayal I just uncovered, selling our house, lying about everything, cheating on me?" I was furious, but I also felt a deep sadness. How did it come to this? How did I end up here? She started crying, trying to look innocent. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was overwhelmed. Mark said he'd help me get out of debt, fix our financial mess. I thought I was doing what was best for the family. By selling our house, by hiding everything from me." I shook my head. "You think that helping? That's just betrayal on a level I can't even describe. I trusted you, Lisa. I trusted us. And you threw it all away for some affair and a bunch of lies." She continued crying, but I was numb. I realized I couldn't just yell and accuse anymore. I had to think clearly about my next steps. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies, especially when she had already sold our home, our biggest asset, without my knowledge. I had a sinking feeling that there was more she hadn't told me, more secrets buried deep. That's when I started to consider revenge. Not just emotional revenge, but something more calculated. I knew she'd been hiding money, selling off our assets, and I had to make her pay. For that, I decided I'd hire a lawyer, dig into her financials, find out exactly how much she'd taken and what she'd done with the money. I also wanted to see if she'd been involved in any other shady deals or if Mark was just the tip of the iceberg. The betrayal hit me hard, but what hurt even more was realizing I'd been blind to her true nature all along. I'd always thought she was ambitious, maybe a little bitchy sometimes, but I never imagined she'd cheat, lie, and sell our life out from under me. I was hurt, angry, and feeling more alone than I ever had before. I kept asking myself, how do I pick up the pieces from this? How do I trust anyone again? And most of all, how do I make her pay for what she's done? After the confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. Lisa was crying, pretending she was the victim here, but I saw right through her act. She's always been good at lying, at twisting things around to make herself look innocent. But I wasn't naive anymore. I started planning my next moves carefully. First, I hired a lawyer. I needed to get a clear picture of just how much she'd stolen, what she'd sold, and how much of our money she'd hidden. The lawyer told me that the house sale was just the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, Lisa had been funneling money into secret accounts, probably with Mark's help. I learned she'd transferred another $80, $0 to some offshore account, and she'd been doing it for months. The worst part, she did it all under my nose, hiding receipts, deleting texts, and lying about her whereabouts. I also found out that she'd been making plans to leave the country. She'd already booked a flight for herself and the kids, supposedly for a vacation, but I knew better. She was trying to disappear, leaving me with nothing. The house was gone, our savings drained, and she was ready to run. I felt like I'd been punched again. How could she do this to her own family, to me? I decided I had to act fast. I couldn't let her slip away with everything. I told my lawyer to start the paperwork for a temporary restraining order to prevent her from leaving with the kids or accessing any more of our money. I also started gathering evidence, screenshots, bank statements, anything that showed her illegal activities and betrayal. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, and I was determined to make sure she didn't walk away scot-free. Meanwhile, I kept questioning her about the affair. She everything at first, claiming I was paranoid and jealous. But I had proof now. I showed her the hotel receipts, the texts with Mark, the bank transfers. Her face turned pale and she started to stammer. She tried to come up with excuses. She said Mark was just a mentor, that the house sale was an investment, and that I owed her marital debt because I'd been distant. That last part really pissed me off. She's blaming me for her betrayal, trying to make me feel guilty for her actions. I told her that I wasn't going to be played anymore. If she thought she could lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. I'd already contacted a divorce lawyer, and I was preparing to take her to court. I wanted her to understand that her lies had consequences, and she wasn't getting away with it. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I kept replaying the moments of our marriage, trying to figure out where I went wrong. But deep down, I knew that her actions weren't about me. They were about her greed, her selfishness, her desire to run away from her mistakes. I'd always believed in sticking things out, but how do you fight for a marriage when one person has already decided to burn it all down? I also started talking to some friends for support. Some of them knew Lisa was a little bitchy, a little manipulative, but nobody saw this coming. Nobody believed she'd do something so cold and calculated. That's when I realized how much I'd been blind. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even longer, and I was just a pawn in her game. Now I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's next. I know I have to protect myself and my kids, but I also want justice. I want her to pay for the lies, the betrayal, the theft. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. I'm not sure how much more I can take, but I'm determined to fight for what's right, even if it means tearing everything apart first. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am, ready to take back control and make sure she can't get away with her betrayal. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I had all the evidence laid out. My lawyer filed for a divorce, citing betrayal and financial misconduct, and we also requested a freeze on her assets. I knew she'd try to hide more, so I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into her financials and her whereabouts. I wasn't about to let her slip away with everything she'd stolen. Meanwhile, I discovered more disturbing details. She'd already transferred some of our savings into a secret account, which she'd used to buy herself a new apartment downtown, one I hadn't even known about. All this time she was planning her escape, and I was just starting to understand how calculated her moves were. I was furious. How could she do this to her own family? To me, the person who'd loved her for years. During this chaos, she was still trying to spin her story. She insisted she was the victim, that she'd been overwhelmed and that Mark was just a mentor, not a lover. She kept crying, claiming she only slept with Mark because she was desperate and that I owed her because I'd been distant. It was all garbage, and I told her so. I told her I saw through her lies, that I had proof of her affair, her selling our house, and her secret accounts. I told her she'd lost all credibility. One day she snapped. She tried to turn things around, claiming I was the bad guy for accusing her without proof. She said she was doing all this for us, that she was trying to fix our financial mess. I just looked at her and said, "You're lying. You've been lying from the start. I don't believe a word you say anymore." That was the moment she realized her lies weren't working anymore. I also learned that she'd been using the money she stole to buy herself designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and even a luxury car. All bought with our money. I felt sick knowing she'd been living this double life, pretending everything was fine while she was secretly planning her escape. It was like a punch to the stomach every time I uncovered another lie. The worst part, I found out she'd already moved into her new apartment. She had the keys, and she was living there while I was still trying to piece everything together. I guess she thought she could run away, leaving me with nothing, and I'd just accept it. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I made arrangements to have her serve the divorce papers at her new place. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be played anymore. As the days went on, I started feeling more anger than sadness. I realized I'd been a fool for so long, trusting her, believing in her lies. But now I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I started thinking about how to make her pay, how to ensure she lost everything she'd gained through her deception. I decided I'd push for full financial accountability and get a court order to recover some of the stolen money. What hurt most was knowing that she'd already moved on, that she was trying to rebuild her life without me. The woman I married, the woman I loved, was gone, replaced by someone who would lie, cheat, and steal from her own family. I kept asking myself, how did she become like this? Was she always like this, or did her greed and ambition turn her into someone I didn't recognize? I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted, but I also knew I had to stay strong. For me, for the kids, for whatever was left of my dignity. I started to think about what I'd do after all this was over. I knew I'd never trust her again. I'd rebuild somehow, maybe not with her, maybe just for myself. But one thing was clear, I'd make sure she paid for what she did. No matter how long it took, I owed her that much at least. The court hearings came faster than I expected, and when they did, everything unraveled even more. Lisa showed up trying to look innocent, but her eyes were hollow. She was desperately claiming that I was trying to ruin her, that I was just jealous and paranoid. Her lawyer tried to paint me as the bad guy, accusing me of controlling behavior. But I had all the evidence, bank statements, texts, the house sale, the offshore accounts that spoke volumes. When it was my turn to speak, I laid it all out plainly. I explained how she'd been sneaking around with Mark, how she'd sold our family home without telling me, and how she'd been draining our savings into secret accounts. I told the court how she'd lied for months, hiding her affair and her financial misconduct. I said I wanted full custody of the kids, that I was filing for divorce on the grounds of betrayal and financial fraud. I made it clear that I wasn't interested in any marital debt she claimed I owed her. Her betrayal was the debt I refused to pay. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, some justice was happening. But at the same time, I was overwhelmed with anger and sadness. I kept thinking about all those years I'd trusted her, about the family we'd built, now shattered beyond repair. I wondered how she could be so cold, so calculating, to do all this behind my back. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was the one at fault, that I'd been distant, that I didn't support her emotionally. But I shot that down quickly. I told the court that her actions proved she'd been dishonest from the start, that her affair and her theft of our assets were evidence of her betrayal. I demanded that the court order her to return the money she'd stolen, and I asked for full custody of the kids, with supervised visits for her until she proved she could be a responsible parent again. The judge made decisions that night. She awarded me custody of the kids, ordered Lisa to pay back the stolen money, and issued a restraining order to prevent her from leaving the country or accessing more of our assets. I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. It was a small victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. In the aftermath, Lisa was furious. She accused me of ruining her life, of trying to punish her for just having an affair. She told the kids I was trying to keep their mom away, but I knew the truth. I was protecting them from her lies and greed. I also discovered she'd been contacting her friends, trying to spin her version of events, but I had the evidence to counter every story she told. I started the process of rebuilding my life from scratch. I found out that she'd already moved into her new apartment, and I made sure to keep my distance. I hired a financial advisor to help me recover what I could, and I began looking into ways to start fresh. The betrayal hurt, but I was determined not to let her ruin me completely. The biggest lesson I learned: never trust blindly. No matter how strong your relationship seems, always keep your eyes open. People are capable of incredible deception when greed and selfishness take over. And when it all falls apart, the only thing you can do is pick up the pieces and move forward. I don't know what's next for me, but I know I won't let her or anyone else take away my dignity. I'll rebuild, and I'll make sure she pays for the lies and the betrayal she left behind. Now that everything's settled legally, I've had some time to reflect on what happened, and honestly, it's been a brutal wake-up call. I never imagined I'd be in this situation by someone I trusted with my life. The betrayal cut deep, but what's worse is realizing how much I had blindly believed in the idea of us, only to find out that she was planning her escape all along. The house, the savings, the family, it was all just collateral damage to her greed and selfishness. I've learned that trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. But I also learned something else. I'm stronger than I thought. I managed to get through the worst, to fight back against her lies and to protect my kids from the fallout. It's not easy, and some days I still wake up feeling angry, betrayed, and lost. But I remind myself that I'm not alone and that I have the strength to move forward. One thing that's clear is that she's a master manipulator. She's good at spinning stories, at lying convincingly, and at making herself look like the victim. But I see through it now. I see her for what she truly is, a woman driven by greed, ambition, and a complete lack of remorse. I hope she faces the consequences of her actions, but honestly, I don't even care about revenge anymore. What I want is peace, stability, and a chance to rebuild my life without her shadow looming over me. The kids are doing okay, considering everything. They're young, resilient, and I make sure they know they're loved, more than ever. I've realized that the most important thing is to give them stability and honesty, even if it means being the bad guy in their eyes for a little while. They deserve to grow up knowing what's right and wrong, and that even when life throws you the worst, you can come out stronger. As for me, I'm taking things one day at a time. I've started therapy, working on rebuilding my confidence and understanding that I didn't do anything wrong. The fault lies entirely with her, and I refuse to carry her guilt. I've also begun planning for a new future, one where I'm not defined by her betrayal but by my resilience. Looking back, I realize that the biggest lesson I've learned is about boundaries, trusting yourself enough to see the red flags early, and knowing when to walk away before everything gets destroyed. I've also learned that sometimes the only way to truly heal is to cut ties completely and start fresh. It's not easy, but it's necessary. So here I am, finally at the end of this nightmare. It's been a long journey, full of pain, anger, and heartbreak. But I've come out the other side with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. I can't change what happened, but I can control how I move forward. And I choose to rebuild, better, wiser, and more aware of what true loyalty and honesty really mean.